I'm going to tie her to Max Crosby as we bring in Jesse Merrick from Silver and Black Sports Network. And last night, I thought Max was awesome. And while the numbers didn't pile up, I thought his impact, Jesse, was just ridiculous. But I often wonder, after games like that, especially on the offensive side, like how Max stays quiet. And by the way, he doesn't always stay quiet. But what did you see last night on offense? Because if I was a defensive player, I'd be like, what is going on?
Yeah, no, I agree, man. It's one of those things that we've seen this a lot over the years, from the Raiders, specifically on offense, where there's been times where it's like, okay, look, the defense played well enough to win the game, and the offense just isn't able to put up the points to back them up. And so it can get frustrating. And I'm sure for a guy like Max, who's been there through a lot of bad offenses, at times wants to throw his hands up and be like, what the hell, But I agree with you. Look, the stats weren't off the charts for him, but he was used in so many different ways. They've got him outside. They move him inside to go up against the guard. They've got him drop it back in coverage, which fans didn't like. And I understand that, but you also have to mix up the looks. You know what I mean? Like, this is a guy that's so long and rangy. Try and mix it up. We see so many times around the league when they're dropping the defensive ends in coverage, the quarterbacks don't even see him because they're expecting them to rush, and they throw the ball right to him. So why would that be any different for a guy like Max Crosby? So I'm all for moving him around and continue to do what they're doing, but offensively, at some point, they have to back him up. And obviously, look, they didn't put up eye-popping numbers. I know Geno's stats were great in the opener, but, at the end of the day, they didn't score a ton of points. So that's something that I think is a little bit worrisome for this team going forward, is they got to figure out a way to consistently score points. They should be putting up 24 or more each and every week. I know they don't have a true number one receiver, but they should be able to do that week in and week out.
Do you think Ashton Jeanty can turn this around, or will he prove to be a wasted top 10 pick?
See, I don't even think it's necessarily on Jeanty. I mean, I think it's more so the offensive line, the guys in front of him. I saw a stat out there that Field Yates put out there. The Raiders are dead last in terms of yards before contact for a running back. Yards before they actually get a hold of the rock. It's negative 2.3. I think they're the only team in the league that has a negative stat in that regard. It's pretty insane. And this is something, again, we've seen from the Raiders over the years. Last year, no matter who was back there at running back, they just didn't have any room to run. When Josh Jacobs was in there, I remember multiple times, he was like, I don't know what you want me to do, like if the holes aren't there. I do think Jeanty has, some say in that. He and Pete both admitted that, he ran the wrong way at one point and, wasn't the greatest in pass protection and stuff like that. So he's still very much learning. They've said that they're breaking him in, but I think it's more so about the guys in front of him, the offensive line, that really need to get it sorted out to be able to give this guy some room to work, because we did see at times, like when he has the room, he can do crazy things. We saw him truck stick another guy. When he's got the vision, the full field of view, when he can stick that foot in the ground and go, like he's a difference maker. So I think the only way they're going to truly be able to unlock him and his potential is if the guys up front get it together. But they're also going through a lot of turnover as well. Not a lot, but it's a bunch of younger guys, and then Jackson Powers-Johnson gets hurt. So now they got a new guy coming in, Alex Kappa at right guard. And yeah, he's a veteran, but he hasn't worked with this first team in a long time because he was hurt throughout training camp. And then you also have Jordan Meredith at center, who's learning a new position and getting used to it. So offensive line is such a developmental position. And also, let's not forget to take into account that they played two really good front sevens in the first and second weeks of the season. Not to give them an excuse, but there's been a lot going against them. I'm real curious to see what it looks like the next 2 weeks for them as the season kind of rolls on in that regard up front.
Jesse Merrick with Cofield Company from Silver and Black Sports Network. What did Geno Smith say after the game? Because that was not a very good Geno Smith game.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think after the first game, everyone's saying, this is just who I am. If you're Geno Smith, Pete said it. He's a 70% guy. He's going to throw the deep ball, those things, and they're all feeling good about themselves. Then he comes out of this one, and you're like, uh-oh. From the start, you saw it was going to be rough. That first throw was an indication of how the rest of the game was going to go. I'm sitting next to Q Myers, and we're both like, oh, man, he just looks like he's off after the first two drives, and that continued throughout the whole course of the game. Just couldn't get into a rhythm. And I'll give Geno props. He took it on the chin, afterwards, and said, hey, look, this one's on me. You can put most of this on me. And that's what you need out of a leader at that position. Because, everybody in the building knows it was on him. He knows if you hold the Chargers to 20 points, you should be able to beat them, especially with a Geno Smith at quarterback. And I know we can sit here and argue, is he underrated? Is he overrated? Is he exactly properly rated? Whatever. But at the very least, he should be able to quarterback a team that's going to put up more than 20 points a game. So that's a game where I think you hear Pete Carroll when he walks up to the podium and says, we had our opportunities and it feels like a missed opportunity. I agree with him big time, because that's not a performance you should see from Geno Smith. Especially when you're going against a team that just does what they does. They don't disguise a ton. They're going to sit back in that too high shell, and they're going to expect you to throw in front of them and take the underneath and everything. And instead, they tried to force the ball deep down the field. And I think he and Pete were all very honest about that after the game, that they were just trying to force it deep too much rather than taking what the defense gave them. Yeah,
and here's the thing. Last year, I think he was one of the most efficient, if not the most efficient, in as far as percentages. I think this is fixable. I think we're in an advantageous situation here in talking about and Geno Smith, because normally you'd be talking about a first-year coach coming in plus a new quarterback, and they're all having to learn one another. But you have two guys that are very familiar with one another, plus Chip Kelly. This is something that they can turn around, I believe.
Yeah, I think they can, and I think it is going to take time, and I agree that Pete and Geno have chemistry, and they have been together, and they know each other, but Geno and Chip have not. And I understand there's a bit of a connection that, Geno wanted to play for him back in college, or almost did, and it just didn't quite work out, and he'd admired him from afar and all this stuff, but they don't have that continuity yet. And I think the thing to me that sticks out is that, look, when your quarterback's struggling, you're not running the football, you're not making it easy on him, even the throws to the sidelines, when you see that your guy is throwing the ball late on those routes toward the sideline and as aggressive as those corners are being, you can't keep calling those plays. So you got to take advantage of the middle of the field and even get in his ear and be like, hey, man, let's not try and push it down the field. Let's not hit that east-west game. Let's just take what they're giving us in the center of the field and make them make a tackle. And so that's where I think maybe the relationship after this game, when they sit back and watch the film, they're going to look like, okay, look, when the deep ball's not there, when the running game isn't there, let's orchestrate it and kind of turn it into a death by 1,000 cuts, attacking the middle of the field rather than these late throws to the sides where you let these corners who are sitting in the cover two be aggressive and be able to jump those passes.
What do you think about Brock Bowers, and how do you think he came out of the game?
Yeah, look, I think he comes out probably better than he entered. Maybe we'll find out obviously more tomorrow and as the game goes on. But you could tell by the usage that he wasn't 100%. Pete even noted that today, when he spoke, and he said it's one of those things where as he continues to get healthier and get that knee fully healed up, it's going to look more like it did in week one, where they're using him all over the formation. Yes, we did see him split out at times. We saw him in the traditional tight end spot, and he did have his catches. He had his targets. He racked up the most receiving yards of anybody on the team, but he just wasn't quite right. And I think even from the simple fact of looking where Geno did or did not go to him in certain situations, that's maybe where it's in the back of Geno's mind of hey, he's not 100% there, so we're not going to force it to him. Instead, you see him trying to force it to Jacoby, whereas I went back and looked at the film, and I think, hey, take your chance with Brock in that situation instead of that interception to Jacoby. I think this week is going to be really big for Brock Bowers, just to kind of shore things up even more, get a full week of practice under his belt, likely, and make sure he is good to go, because now it's time to respond. You got to get the job done in DC, especially against a team that has a quarterback who's kind of hobbled.
Jesse Merrick up on Cofield Company. Let's go back to the defense. So when I said the defense played well, outside of the 60-yarder, which is that's a gigantic play. You can't give that up against Quentin Johnson. I thought they controlled Herbert. They kept everything underneath. Now, did they do that? Was that a fine job by Crosby and the D-line, or was it actually the doing of the back end?
Yeah, I think it was more the back end, honestly. I wasn't super impressed with what I saw from the guys up front, and I've seen different views on that as well. And I'm ready to have that argument with anybody, because I could see where you can make the argument that at times they managed to contain Herbert, I think more in the second half than did in the first half. But they just didn't impact the game enough for my liking compared to what we saw in the second half against the Patriots. For me, the issue was in the first half in particular, when they're trying to contain Herbert. He's able to break free up the middle on the edges, extend the plays. That first touchdown pass when he throws it in the corner of the end zone there with Paul Mallon coverage. That was one where he extended the play. He broke contain and is able to let it rip. So I wasn't as impressed as I think some people are with the performance of the defensive line in particular in this game. Really, the only play of note comes to mind was Jonah Laulu's play. When he comes away with the sack, if I remember right. And obviously I know Max could possibly be credited with a fumble and all those different things. But, it just wasn't super impressed. I would say it was more so the guys on the back end. Aside from that 60-yard bomb, like you said, I actually liked what I saw out of the corners. I thought they were battling. Caillou Blue in particular, too, coming up in run coverage like we talked about at times. He's the willing tackler. And then Eric Stokes, I thought, fared really well against a really good group of receivers that the Chargers have. And let's not forget, Justin Herbert in these first two games now is playing at an elite level. So to be able to do that against this offense, like that's a big win. And going in, I was real curious to see what the communication was going to look like between the safeties and the linebackers in particular. And for the most part, I thought that they fared pretty well. I mean, there were times, when they would send the blitz, they're getting hit behind over the top, but you expect that, when that comes if you don't get home with it. And so I wasn't super impressed with them. Again, they played well enough to win the game, but I wasn't super impressed with the defensive line in this one and the rotation of guys that they had going through there.
Now, because most people are just kind of tired of the Chiefs story, we certainly are in the AFC West, enough. We're always looking for the team that can knock them off. I don't know, through like 2.5 quarters, you're thinking, okay, maybe the Chargers are. I know at some sports books the Chargers are the favorite. But then in the fourth quarter, they start to charger it up, and you're like, okay, I can't trust these guys. How do you feel about the Chargers?
Yeah, they're like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing, right? I mean, like with Herbert, the big thing is throughout his career, he's obviously got that elite talent, but the consistency hasn't been there. It has been now for the first 2 weeks of the season. What's it going to look like as the year wears on, as teams get more of a book on them? It's very clear that, like, right now they're playing at a very high clip against the blitz, and they're doing a great job attacking the intermediate areas of the field, particularly in the middle of the field. So when teams start to take that away, how do you fare? And I think they're doing a lot of this without much of a running game. And so that, to me, is impressive that they've been able to do that. So I think, look, you look at how the first couple of weeks have transpired. The Broncos, who the heck really knows, what you're going to get out of them, and Bo Nix, going forward throughout the year. But I think you're very interested in what you see out of the Chargers right now. The early returns from them in weeks 1 and 2 have been really good. And so I think they're a team that right now you have to put them in the driver's seat. Forget the record and what it is like with that, but I think just from what we've seen specifically on the field, I think you got to put them in the driver's seat in this division. And I think it's going to be the most competitive division in football. And whoever finishes last in this division is probably one of the better 4 seeds in the NFL.
Shooting with Jesse Merrick, Silver and Black Sports Network. Should Tom Brady be in the booth? We're calling it BoothGate.
Yeah. BoothGate. Oh, man, yeah. Brady's involved in so many gates. It's ridiculous. There's a lot we could talk about with Brady, especially from yesterday. But no, yeah, I think the whole booth thing is kind of wild. Bad look. Maybe just throw some AirPods in and, set it up to where you're in the owner's booth with Mark and just listen that way. Because I'll be honest, I don't buy it for 1 second that he's not involved in some sort of game planning. Why else would he be up there in the booth? You know what I mean? I get wanting to listen and be a part of it all, but you can likely do that from somewhere else. You can figure that out. I would guess. I'm not an audio expert. Maybe Griffin can help us out with that, but there's got to be a way to patch it into the booth where Mark Davis and them are sitting. So yeah, no, I think it's interesting. And also too, from my perspective, like if you've got him, why would you not utilize him in some sort of game planning? Again, this is a guy that's around the league talking to everybody, picking up information. I know you want to act like he's not sitting there learning things about these other teams and he's just not going to share it. Like, Come on, this guy's got money in the game with the Raiders. So it's a bad look for sure. Are we all overreacting about it? Of course we are, because that's what we do, but not a great look, especially when he's up there, in tight suit, everything looking good. You're like, man, this guy's just a menacing figure here in Chip Kelly's ear. And I saw some really funny comments on Twitter where people were like, well, if he's not actually involved in the play calling, maybe he should be after last night.